Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third week of Tier List Thursdays. Now, I want to change it up a bit this time. Instead of doing just video games and Nintendo related, we're going to do movies. We're going to add a movie to this mix. I apologize if you guys do not like this stuff, but I personally enjoy watching these movies, especially the Spider-Man movies. Because he's my favorite superhero of all time. Sure, his movies are fantastic. Like most of them are fantastic. Some of them are not so great, but most of them are pretty great. Yeah, so we got the S tier, which is the best of the best, a near perfect season. A movie. A tier, a great season with somewhat flaws, some flaws to pick up. B tier, B tier is a good movie, but with some major flaws. But I feel like it has potential to be a good season more than a bad season. C tier is a pretty flawed movie, but with some potential for it to be a good movie. But it is not terrible to be a D tier movie. And D is just terrible. Or the worst of the worst. Now, I will say, exception for probably like one or two movies. All these are great. All these are legitimate great. And this is close. But, with that out of the way, guys, let's get started on this tier list. So, we're going to go through the Amazing Spider-Man era. So, the Andrew Garfield era. Now, with the Amazing Spider-Man, at the time, I used to not be a fan of the Amazing Spider-Man era. Not at all. After the Sam Raimi trilogy that we got, the masterpiece we got with that, I wasn't a fan of the Amazing Spider-Man movies, but I have rewatched the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, and we're talking about the Amazing Spider-Man 1. I actually didn't mind it. I thought it was solid. I wouldn't say it's the best of the best. I mean, there are some flaws. I mean, obviously, it's too rushed. The pacing is not that great. Andrew Garfield, I mean, he might be a great actor, but for the Spider-Man role, he's not the best at all. But I will say, it's different. And I like how they changed something. They try to reboot the series. And for what they did here, I thought it was solid. I thought it was okay. I don't think it's that bad. Sorry, Siri. I don't think it was that bad. So if I were to put this movie anywhere, I'd probably put it I probably will put it in the B tier. I think it's not that terrible. I think it's right in the middle. I don't think it's the best of the best, but I think it's solid. Next we go to The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And now my opinions of the movie just start to go down. I remember not liking this movie at all, and I rewatch, and it's not great. It's not that great at all. Well, I would put this movie probably. I mean, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Again, the pacing is not that great. I think the actors are not as memorable as the Sam Raimi trilogy, and I just think it's just not that great. For me, I'm gonna put it probably in the bottom. I'm not a fan of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. They could have done a better job with this movie, but hey, man, it is what it is. Then they rebooted. They moved the Spider-Man era to the MCU, which is a new thing. Like, it wasn't before. Sony owned the Spider-Man era, and then it got moved to the MCU. And I will say, I definitely prefer the movie posters for the other Spider-Man movies over the new ones. I mean, the new ones are not that great. Like, I don't like the Far From Home. We'll get to that later. But Homecoming, it's okay. The movie poster is okay, but for the movie, I think it's solid. I don't like the addition of Tony Stark. Like, I think that's pretty dumb. It's supposed to be a Spider-Man movie with Iron Man in there. It's so unnecessary. I thought Tom Holland was a good Spider-Man. I don't think he's the best. I definitely prefer Miles Morales and Tobey Maguire, but I think Tom Holland did a fine job. Yeah, I think it's great. I think Homecoming's actually a great movie. I think it's probably a B tier movie. I think it's solid. I don't think it's the best of the best, obviously, but I think it's right there. I think it's pretty flawed that the fact that's, like, obviously, it feels different. It's not, the characters are more memorable than they were in the Amazing Spider-Man. I don't think they're memorable as the original trilogy, but I think it's solid. Then we get to Far From Home, and my opinion of this movie has dropped significantly last time. Let me pull this up pretty quickly, guys, but Yeah, my opinion of this movie did drop pretty harshly, because I used to think this was a great movie. Um, if I can find it. Yeah, I used to have this movie pretty high on my list, but looking at it now, I think it's dropped pretty low. Like from the last time I watched, I think it's dropped pretty significantly. Um, to the point where I'm just not the fan of this movie at all. I'm not. I don't like this movie at all. Like the villain is great. That's the only good thing I could take out of it. But other than that, I've not been a fan. I'm not a fan of this movie. I think it's just. The first movie was more focused on Spider-Man, but the second movie just made me not like Tom Holland as much as a lot of people do. Like I think he's fine, but I just like he's way better in the first movie and the third movie. But the second movie, not so great. That's a big thing because Spider-Man is a main character. Um, yeah, not a fan of this movie. Here, I was gonna go with the D tier. Actually, no. I think it has some potential to be a great movie because I know what they're trying to do with this too with the Iron Man trilogy because Iron Man passed away with Endgame and stuff like that. Then we get to No Way Home, and this is the most recent movie. And I'm not sure this guys, but I really enjoyed this movie. I think it was a great movie. I like they brought back all three Spider-Mans. I think the villain, I mean Green Goblin coming back, all the original villains coming back is just fantastic. I like that idea. I think Tom Holland was his best in this movie for sure. Um, yeah, there's a lot of great movies. I like MJ in this movie. Uh, yeah, this movie is great. But I don't think it's the best movie at all. I don't think that. First of all, I think obviously, Andrew Garfield was a fantastic character in this movie. Absolutely great. The fact that he like the reason why he was a movie because I like him, dude. I want him back in another movie because of this movie. It was he was just fantastic in this movie. But yeah, I don't think it's top tier, but I do think it's like high tier. I think it doesn't have the perfection of the other movies. I think Doctor Strange is alright in this movie. And it just the pacing. That's my main issue. But the pacing was just all over the place, all over this movie. So that is my main problem with No Way Home. For that caused it for being not a top tier season, but a high tier season for me. I think it's an A tier season. It just the pacing just ruins it. Now we get to the Sam Raimi trilogy, and this is where we get to the great movies. This is where like there's some great movies here. We're gonna start off with Spider-Man 1, and Spider-Man 1 is the original movie, so that just it's the original. I think it is a fantastic movie. I used to have this movie pretty low on my list. Like, where did I rank it before? Oh no, I lost it. All right, let me pull it up real quickly. Yeah, I used to have it pretty low on my list. Yeah, I used to have it below Far From Home, which I heavily disagree nowadays. I think Spider-Man 1 is a really great to start of the Spider-Man series. I like how they're doing the cartoon. I think Green Goblin, again, is probably the best villain in Spider-Man history. I think he's fantastic in this movie, and I like him but even better in No Way Home. Like, he's even better in No Way Home. The pacing was pretty solid. Like, I think it's better than No Way Home's pacing. And also, I love the lessons that you learn. I feel like the newer Spider-Man movies, you don't really learn a lesson from it. Like I don't like. It's fine. I like seeing action, but just seeing like a lesson theme coming out in a movie is great. With responsibility being the main theme of the original Spider-Man movie, which I just enjoy. I like that. However, I do have some flaws with the movie that doesn't put it in the top tier. I think the fight scenes have not aged well though. Like, I guess they were okay, but even there, back then, it wasn't that great. We'll get to the other two movies where the fight scenes are significantly better, but with this movie, I think the fight scenes are just not that great. That's my main problem. I also think Spider-Man's chemistry with Mary Jane is so, like, out of the place. It's so questionable. It's not that great. Their chemistry is just not that good in this movie compared to the next movie we'll talk about. But Those are my main flaws with the movie. I think Mary Jane is just not that great in this movie either. But other than that, I think this is a high tier season. I don't think it's top tier, but I think it's high tier. I think I'm gonna put it. I'm gonna put it above No Way Home. I think it's close. Let me get to Spider-Man 2, and this is universally looked at as one of the best Spider-Man movies of all time. I agree. I think it is a perfect movie. I don't see any flaw with Spider-Man 2. I cannot think of a flaw of this movie. I think it's a perfect movie. And I actually want to do a movie. I want to do like a specific video describing why I think Spider-Man 2 is the best superhero movie we've ever gotten. Better than Infinity War, better than the Dark Knight. I think it's better than any superhero movie we've ever gotten. I think it's a perfect movie. I think it's like a near perfect movie. I can't think of a flaw in this movie. I really cannot. I literally cannot think of a flaw. Yeah, the villain is fantastic. Spider-Man and Mary Jane's connection is great. I think Mary Jane is a lot better in this movie. Tobey Maguire the fact that this movie doesn't center around his fights as Spider-Man. It's centered around choice. What he wants to be in his life. Like, does he want to be Spider-Man? Because he was forced to be Spider-Man and in the first movie. But the second movie, he has a choice. That's the main theme. So the fact that he gives up being Spider-Man, obviously because he loses powers, because he's I want to go into more detail if I do a specific video on this, but there's a lot of reasons why I think this is the best superhero movie I've ever gotten, and I think it's a perfect movie, and I think it easily goes in the top tier. Like, it's just it's perfect, bro. It's a perfect movie. I literally cannot think of a flaw in this movie at all. Like, I think it's just 10 out of 10 all over the place. Production stands, fantastic. Characters, fantastic. Movie poster, fantastic. I think this is probably the best movie poster we've ever gotten. I think it's up there with No Way Home and the original Spider-Man. I think movie posters are fantastic. I already said characters' theme is fantastic. Music is fantastic. Like, all 10s out of 10 everywhere, bro. It's a near perfect movie. I think it's perfect. Then we get to Spider-Man 3, which there was many expectations coming into Spider-Man 3. And obviously, it didn't live up to the hype as much as Spider-Man 2. However, when I rewatch this movie, it's probably the most underrated Spider-Man movie we've ever gotten. I think it's super underrated. Yes, it's not in the perfection of Spider-Man 2. Like, Spider-Man 2 is a perfect movie. Spider-Man 3 has some flaws. Mary Jane is not the best. Alright, let me get that out of the way. She's not the best in this movie. I think the pacing is so over the place because it was supposed to be a movie about Sandman. And then we talk about what's his face? Harry. The Harry stuff with his father. That was in that arc was in the movie. And it also got Venom's arc. Like, it was so, the production stance was so all over the place in that movie. I think the jokes in this movie are slightly cheesy, but I do not mind them as much as people do. I think Bully Maguire is a fantastic meme that we've gotten. Yeah, I think it's an underrated movie. I think it's very, very underrated. I think it has some flaws, though. It has some major flaws. But I think it's also, like, you can ignore those flaws for it to be a terrible movie. I think it's probably, I would probably put it I wouldn't say C tier, but I'm going to put it probably right here. Right above Homecoming. I think it's better than Homecoming. That might be controversial, but I just personally prefer Spider-Man 3 over Homecoming. And I used to rank this pretty low on my list, which I heavily disagreed because I enjoyed this movie last time I watched it. Maybe because the Sam Raimi trilogy, I just loved all three of these movies. Like, Spider-Man 1 is a great movie to start. Spider-Man 2 is a perfect movie. Spider-Man 3 has some flaws, but I think it's still a solid movie. Next, we get into the Spider-Man verse, and you guys already know where I'm going with this. I think it's easily a top tier season as well. You could switch which two, honestly, is the best movie in Spider-Man history because they're both, like, so perfect. I personally probably would prefer, in my opinion, Spider-Man 2 because I just like how Tobey Maguire has a choice. But the action sequence is so much better and Into the Spider-Man verse. It's like, Oh my gosh. Like, oh, I didn't even mention the train scene with Spider-Man 2, but the animated stuff, it's so good. Like, what they did, this makes you want movies more like Into the Spider-Verse, because it's just, I want a second movie. I want a second movie of the Into the Spider-Verse, because this is such a perfect movie. It's a perfect movie again. But actually, there might be some nitpicks with this movie. It's just slight nitpicks. I could care less just being a fighting movie. I could care less about that. The villains aren't as memorable as the movies, but that's just a nitpick. That's just a nitpick I have Into the Spider-Verse, but I think it's still a top tier season. I think it's in my opinion, the second best movie we've ever gotten for Spider-Man, and it can go either way. But yeah, you cannot go wrong. And let's finish this off with Venom. Alright, so with Venom, I did watch these movies though, and they're not that bad. They're not that bad. I don't think they're terrible, but they're not they're not horrible. They're not horrible, but they're not as great and memorable as the other movies. But I think they're fine. You know what? I'm just gonna put them both probably in the C tier. Probably above. Yeah, this is great. Yeah, I don't really have much to say because it's a Spider-Man tier list, but I think they're fine. They're just fine movies. They were better than Spider-Man 3, but that's okay. Now I'll check back, guys, and I'll go over the list and see if I make any changes. Okay, guys, so I have decided what changes I'm gonna make. So with the top tier, I'm gonna keep it the same. I think you can go either way. Which movie is the best? Like, you can go either way with these two. I think they're better. However, I don't think these two movies are up there with the S tier. But I'm gonna make my first switch. But I'm gonna put No Way Home above the original Spider-Man movie. I'm gonna make that my first change because I feel like Spider-Man 1. There's some scenes that just have not aged well in this movie. But Spider-Man 2, they're perfect still to this day. But with Spider-Man 1, like there's just way too many scenes that have not aged well. Like when Peter Parker got bitten by the spider, like that scene has not aged well at all. With No Way Home, like there are some many flaws in this movie I have. They're just nitpicks though. But yeah, that's my first change. And then with the B tier, I think Spider-Man 3 should stay there. Homecoming is fine. The Amazing Spider-Man is fine. I think these three are just fine there. Then we get to C tier, and then this is where there's gonna be a huge drop. Far From Home, I just don't see it being better than these two movies. I just not a fan. So that's gonna instantly drop it already down to the D tier, which I think Venom 1 and 2, I think they're fine there. On its own, I think they're fine there. To be honest, I'm thinking about putting the Amazing Spider-Man down there because there's some many flaws of the list, but I think there's still potential for it to be. It had potential for it to be a great movie. And then we get to the D tier, and though I always knew the Amazing Spider-Man 2 was just, I knew like it's super flawed. Like there's so many issues with this movie that I have, but when I look at it in a perspective, I watched both movies. Now, when I watched both of them, I will say, let's talk about the Amazing Spider-Man 2, because I just came into it knowing it was a terrible movie, and I was laughing because like how bad it is that made it great for me. I just found it entertaining. Like I laughed how bad it was that it made it entertaining. With Far From Home, it's bad, and I just think it's super boring. In the end of the day, I think it's just a boring movie. Like you cannot ignore that. Spider-Man 2 has so many flaws. The pacing is so terrible. Andrew Garfield is not that great in this movie. Like there's so many flaws in this movie. The production did not even know what they were doing with this movie. Like they did not know what they're doing. But I cannot ignore them. How boring, and I mean boring, Far From Home was. That I have to put it probably in the bottom of the list, and that's gonna be my last change I make on this list. And that is my tier list, guys. Yeah, I think this is great. Yeah, that's my tier list, guys. If you guys like this, leave a like and subscribe, and tell me what tier list I should do in the future. Thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you guys on the next one. We out.